Welcome to the Love Your Story podcast. Today we're here for a dose of inner peace. Isn't that what we're all searching for anyway? And some days we may have a taste of it. Some days it's a million miles away. And some days we have it dialed. We want that. Today, Sohale Sizar, the founder of Soul, with the mission to illuminate the daily practice of gratitude for his rapidly growing online community, of which I am a part, is here. And we're talking about the practice of spiritual alchemy, knowing ourselves and finding that elusive inner peace and joy. So stay tuned. We have something great for you. Stories are our lives in language. Welcome to the Love Your Story podcast. I'm Lori Lee, and I'm excited for our future together of telling stories, evaluating our own stories, and lifting ourselves and others to greater places because of our control over our stories. This podcast is about empowerment and giving you, the listener, ideas to work with in making your stories work for you. Story power serves you best when you know how to use it. Sohale Sizar has been an entrepreneur since the age of 9, with 15 years of dedicated practice in meditation and gratitude. Sohale translated his experience into earning a Stanford MBA and building ventures spanning nonprofit charities, education, and consumer technology. That's a lot of stuff. Sohale is now an entrepreneur on a mission to facilitate access to one's inner light. What a great mission. Let's find that inner light. Help us, Sohale. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
I can't wait to hear what all of this is, but we need to start with your story. That's what we do. So usually we all have something happen in our lives that we learn from, that helps us to understand something better. And then we often want to share it. I mean, for most people, that's kind of the basis. So let's talk about a couple things with your story. First, how did you get to this place? And second, what is your mission and how is that unfolding for you? How do you do it? Can we start at the beginning?
Yeah, for sure. So, the pivotal part of my life was spanning many years. I was born and raised in a very homogeneous neighborhood. I struggled to culturally connect with folks. I was a bit of an outlier. My classmates couldn't understand me, whether I was in kindergarten, first grade, second grade. I vividly remember that.
Where did you grow up?
In New Hope, Pennsylvania.
Okay. And what's your cultural background?
I'm Persian. I'm
Okay.
Persian background. So at that time, probably one of the Persian in that community. And so as a result of that, I had to learn about other people building bridges, but I also had to learn about myself and where I would find inner joy and peace. And faith and spirituality, even at a young age, was my refuge per se. And then there was this one year where we moved to this other community for a brief amount of time. We were basically, building another home, and we needed another place to stay while that was happening. And that was a very heterogeneous neighborhood. And I had this teacher, and her name was Miss Wilson. And Miss Wilson was actually in the civil rights era. And she would go out there and she would say, I would just walk up to that white water fountain, I'd drink from it. And for the first time in my life, I was in third grade, I realized that respect and love were not simply privileges, but they were a right. And that totally transformed my perception of what I was expecting of how I should be treated. And with that backing and her love, I ended up going back to that quote unquote neighborhood and going from there of how I could change the world and bring more equality, not only towards others, but towards my inner self.
That is a very young age to start at.
Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
I have to give you some real kudos here. I think a lot of people, when they feel excluded or other, that they turn into themselves, and there's almost a bitterness, like it's a hard thing to get through, and they might get angry and bitter about it. And instead you're turning to this place of, how do I make myself happy? What is joy? What does that look like for me? That's brilliant. In third grade. Oh my gosh.
Well, Lori, if I were to be totally real with you, so my because why not? My mother and well, I guess, my family is a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. And so growing up, even at a very young age, we would have these stories about different prophets, whether it's Abraham, whomever. And there was a common theme with a lot of these folks, which is that they had a message. They were excluded. They were marginalized. It was often about equality. And so when I was growing up in my mind, maybe this was a form of therapy for myself. I'd say, you know what? I'm not alone. And there were others in the past who went through similar things. And so I'm like them. And in fact, their blood is in mine. And so that, even at 7 or however, that age range, was a powerful form of solace for many years to come.
This just goes to prove the point of the importance of knowing your roots.
Yeah.
I have always, I read it somewhere in a book years ago, but the importance of to give your children an understanding of their heritage, where they come from, tell the stories of the ancestors. And by doing that, when they come up against hard things, they know, oh, I come from a line of people who can handle hard things. And I think we forget to do that sometimes because we get so involved in our world that unless, like you say, in your case, it was maybe a religious procedure, or procedure is not a good word with religion, but a thing that you did, that you shared those stories so that you understood those people and what they went through. But I think sometimes we forget to tell stories about the great grandpa and the great great grandma and what they go through. A lot of times probably because we don't know them, but boy, does that give roots to help young people as they grow up. That's a beautiful example. Okay, so on to the second part, which is, what is your mission and how do you do it?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think we more of that in life. And I think so many times we focus on the future. Where are we going? What are we going to do? How are we going to get there? Versus focusing on the past. And that's actually one of the reasons why history was one of my favorite subjects growing up, because I loved learning about what other folks went through. And a lot of times we think like we're creating the wheel, so to speak, like we've come up with these ideas and perspectives, et cetera. And we know that for thousands of years, whether it was, the Greeks or the Persians or whatever other civilization, Chinese, they were speaking about having these philosophical concepts. So what does it mean to be human, right? What does it mean to live, et cetera? And we can learn from that as well.
Oh, so much, so much. If only we looked closely at that. Oh, so much to learn your rights. They've been through it. Some beautiful civilizations and some really big minds have already played with these ideas. We have so much to learn. Okay, so now your vision is to help people. Let's talk about your app for a little bit. I'm on your app. I'm getting my prompts to.
Oh, that's awesome.
and some of them are. So he has an app called Soul that, and you can tell us more about it. But anyway, it sends you prompts every once in a while to think of something that you're grateful for. And I'm digging the prompts because they're coming in ways that I don't usually think about what I'm grateful for. So it's kind of taking me into different paths that actually are beautiful. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that and how that ties into your bigger picture.
For sure. 3 years ago, a friend of mine basically said to me, you should start a gratitude journal. And like so many people, I bought a journal. I did it for 5 days and then I failed because I had other things to do. I just didn't think about it, right? It's so easy. And so it's so easy to fall off the wagon, so to speak. So what I did was I would write an email to myself and I'd schedule send it. I would write what I'm grateful for. I'd schedule send it for a few days out. God knows how many. I would just do it based on how I felt. And then it'd come back in my inbox. I'd reply to it, schedule send it again. And I ended up doing that. Yeah, I've been doing it. I did it for 3 years. And so then I started last year, I started being a part of these founder groups, et cetera. I was a CEO of another company. I was part of the other founder groups. And so I would share what would work for me emotionally because it transformed my life, having a grateful attitude. And many know that gratitude is important, but I think I didn't know how important. Like I didn't know that it improves quality of sleep, that it improves your longevity, increases your longevity. You live longer, better cardiovascular health, a boosted immune system. It's just incredible. And so when I shared this with my friends and family, they were like, we want to use this. So that's what led to Soul. And Soul is a text message based tool. You basically get these spontaneous nudges, as you mentioned, with these gratitude prompts, and you can reply to the prompts with a video or a photo, voice memo, you name it. It's super easy. And I designed this for me because I want something to be easy, a part of my life. And so all the replies that you make to these prompts end up being encrypted in this online journal where you can see all the moments that you've been loved. And if you want, you can opt in and get psychological insights as well as recommendations of practitioners, workshops, events that are local to you for you to experience inner joy. So the vision with this is to build greater access to the inner light, and gratitude is really the doorway that allows us to do that.
Okay, so tell me more about your mission for building this inner light. What does that look like?
Yes. So, I mean, I think the first step is, can we empower individuals to actually build a gratitude practice or gratitude habit? And my vision by 2030 is to reduce the anxiety of 95 million people, starting with gratitude.
Nice. That's a great mission.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's nearly half the individuals in this country that report feeling anxious or burnt out, which is a lot of us.
Yeah, that's a big deal right now. So yeah, all power to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, I think what's really powerful now that I just don't see this anywhere, Lori. I don't see it anywhere. And this is why I feel like it's so worth working on, which is that so many of us are trying to find our way. We're looking for resources, ideas, podcasts, books, exercises, workshops, like you name it. And how do we find out? It's like from our friends of friends. It's from like someone we hear of something else, right? Like word of mouth. But my vision is like, what if there was a vetted, curated selection of places, people, resources that are tailored to your psychology that can allow you to find inner joy and peace? I mean, what if that's possible for any American in this country versus just going on the, in the Wild West and, God forbid, waste your money?
How would you do that?
So the way we do it is through this gratitude journal, actually. So the gratitude journal is a unique data set that shows where you find joy, right? It's unique to every person. And what we are doing, and these are for those who opt in, we then leverage AI and we've built this curated list through, my own network, communities, research of practitioners who are vetted, who have high integrity, who are shown to change people's lives. As well as even workshops, events, you name it, that would then be recommended to you based off of your gratitude journal. So we can see.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we can understand like, okay, you're this type of person with these types of interests, et cetera. And this particular person would be great for you.
How long have you been doing that?
About a couple months now. This is like, I call this the Google for wellness, right? And it's a really cutting edge thing that we're doing right now.
Okay, so have you had any success with it? I mean, a couple months, you're just barely starting. People haven't probably responded enough to get enough data to help them, but have you seen any success?
Well, what I could say is that we put out the gratitude journal in March 2024. And since then, we've grown 2x, 2x. The engagement, the retention is extremely high. At least 65% of people stick with the tool as it started from a side project to now, the last 6 months. And that people write more than 3 times more on it than an average text message back to Soul. And so what we're finding is that people love the tool, Soul. They continue using it and they're finding inner joy. And of course, we're having fun with this too, because I'm of course a customer of my own product here. And I love getting recalls, so to speak, like it'll bring back 2 weeks ago, you shared this thing about what you're grateful for. Right. And it just reminded me, oh, wow, I'm loved. And, we have companies using this. We have universities using this. At Stanford, we had a very successful pilot. And one of the students mentioned something around the lines of, well, I'm trying to get a therapy appointment. I'm struggling to, I'm busy. But this tool actually has reminded me of how much life is more full that I don't even feel like I need to go to, to get a therapist appointment. I'm like, I feel better. It's kind of helping me. It's not kind of, it is.
So how did you come up with all your providers?
The most important thing for me is spiritual integrity. And so the way that I've looked at it is I've really just done the research, and I have a team of folks who do research where we interview folks. We interview folks who we ask them who has been pivotal to your journey. And these practitioners are often already well-known, potentially. Some of them are rising stars. And through that research, really through someone going and talking to one person that ends up talking to 5 other people, then another 5 other people.
More word of mouth.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, super interesting. Tell me about spiritual alchemy. How does that tie
Yeah,
into this? And I always loved The Alchemist, that book. So this idea of spiritual alchemy is kind of fun. Break that down for us. How do you see
for
spiritual
sure.
alchemy?
This is fun. So spiritual alchemy. So we got to take a step back for here. Like we all want peace and happiness, right?
Right.
And the mystics in the room, they would agree on three things here, which is why do we want to, be happy, or at least in the world of mysticism, the why of being a mystic is that God is the only reality, or divinity is the only reality. The what is to be one with God, or to realize God consciousness. So that's how, at least in Kriya Yoga or many of the mystical paths, nirvana, moksha, you name it, they would frame it. So how do we do that? How do we actually realize our divinity? Is really where spiritual alchemy comes in. And that answer is different to every mystical path, whether it's Hinduism, Kabbalah, Sufism, Christian mysticism, you name it. So spiritual alchemy, one particular element of spiritual alchemy, or one, let me say, framework of spiritual alchemy is rooted in Sufism that I'll share because I think it's so profound, right? So the idea is that there's 6 primordial settings of the universal person, meaning like the root quintessence of a person. And these 6 settings or themes or modes translate into the physical realm in these ways: north, south, east, west, height, and depth, right? So that accounts for this like 3D reality. And so each of those 6 settings relate to our body. And so they're mapped down onto our body. So the first 4 of them are related to 4 different positions on our chest. So for example, north is representing winter and the idea of seeking refuge ultimately with God or divinity, and removing oneself from multiplicity of this world to oneness. And so that meditation ends up happening on the top right chest. And that's basically invoking the name of God with this idea of being saved, of strength, but also of purity, of removing from multiplicity towards oneness. Then there's this idea of the East, right? And that's on the other side of the chest, a little bit above the heart. And that represents, I would say, an opening or spring. So this is about manifestation, about warmth, joy, the rising sun. And that's embodying ultimately victory and accomplishment of life. And it's really this idea of the act of life. And then you go to the south, that's underneath the heart, where it's like really this fire and this warmth, and that represents love. And so it's embodying the divine name of love and ultimately divine mercy. And then you go to the west, which represents more nostalgic, and that represents peace. And peace, ultimately peace and finding contentment in life. And then the forehead, the third eye, represents height and this idea that, almost like the moon in the sky, it really is just like the only light that exists. It's the objective, God or divinity or consciousness, however you like to pronounce that or say that. And then the depth is the spiritual heart, which is about where nearly every mystical tradition agrees upon. It's kind of around the navel area, underneath the rib cage, somewhere in that area at least. And the idea is like this is ultimately divine consciousness that is within you. And so those are the 6 primordial settings or modes. And on each of those, mystics meditate on, at least Sufi mystics in particular paths meditate on each day. And the idea is to ultimately then embody a God or divinity and ultimately emanate his life and adorn yourself with his attributes. With that, we ultimately find peace. Yeah.
Do you do the meditation on all
Yeah,
these
absolutely.
things?
Otherwise, we won't be talking about it.
Okay, so every day you meditate on each of these areas.
Exactly. That's right.
Okay, so how do you think we find inner peace then? I mean, how does someone who doesn't understand that type of meditation or have that same cultural background or understanding, do you have to have that to find inner peace, in your opinion? How do we find inner peace?
Well, the meditation I shared it's irrelevant of culture. It's just simply of understanding these different phases of life and ultimately seeing divinity in them. So how do we find inner peace? Well, I think the first one is our belief systems. That's the first step. What are the belief systems that are informing how we believe that we exist? What is reality to us? So a lot of us have these narratives in our mind that inform that we are this human being that does X, Y, and Z, or we see that ourselves as this way or that way, or as a family person or not a family person, whatever it is. It's really understanding the narratives. A lot of times these narratives are subconscious or informed by the world. And so we just take them up. We just grab them and we just keep moving forward with them. And we miss out on realizing we're being self-aware that we're being informed by them. A lot of times, like even the culture that we consume are speaking about narratives of how we believe ourselves to be. So that's the first one, is becoming self-aware of the narratives.
And so Love Your Story, the podcast, was based on coming to accept the parts of your story that didn't turn out or seem like it should have been. Like it's about the process. It's a verb. Love Your Story was about coming to accept what is in your story, in your narrative. So could I translate what you said into that it's not just the awareness of the narratives, but it's also the work of coming to find peace with your narratives?
Well, I would say that's the second step, right?
Okay.
Which is you're aware of it, and then you take agency of what that narrative is. For example, I was bullied growing up. It's true. I experienced that. I could have said that, well, as you said earlier, I could have translated that differently.
Mm-hmm.
But if I take that as agency and say, well, actually, that's empowered me to be who I am today and to have more compassion and understanding and also self-respect of how I expect to be treated. Well, that's loving my story. And I had to go through that in all facets of my life, how I eat, how my self-image, psychologically, spiritually, etc. I think that's the first step, is finding peace with those narratives. And if we don't find peace with them, taking agency and transforming those narratives, rewriting those narratives in the ways that make us feel more at peace.
Do you know how lovely this is for me to hear? Because it's so true. You are preaching what this whole podcast is about. It truly, because the whole thing is about coming to understand and accept what our stories are, and then learning how to reframe them, which we spend a lot of time on the show. There's a 5-step process for reframing the stories that you don't have peace with, and getting to that place where you can live peacefully and love your story regardless of the messiness of it. And it's just such important work that I love to hear you saying this, that it's a step to inner peace, because it just simply is. You can't have inner peace if you're not living with a sense of integrity about the things that you believe in, or an acceptance of where you've been, no matter how messy and ugly it is. There has to be some coming to God with it,
Absolutely. And I think that's where the spirit, like after that psychological journey, I'd like to say, there's then that element of, well, how does that relate to who I am and why I'm here? The why, the question of why. And as soon as we start asking the question why, then we start wondering all the existential questions and the philosophical questions and the mystical questions of what's my purpose? Why am I here? Where am I going? What am I going to do within this body? Right. And
how do you find the answers to those, though? I mean, those existential questions are the big ones that I think sometimes you're always searching for.
For me, it really has been meditation and this spiritual alchemy that I described. Because what ends up happening is when I quiet myself, the answers start surfacing up, and not just within meditation, but outside of meditation. And so many people, they talk about these types of stories or experiences in their own life where they suddenly were thinking or feeling this, and then suddenly there's a synchronicity that happens, right? That something pops up, right? That validates what their inner self was feeling. That starts happening, and we start getting these clues and suggestions, and then ultimately, and at least Paramahansa Yogananda would definitely say this in this particular way, if I'd be so bold, which is that you say, finally, just ask whoever you believe in, that God, with God, divinity, etc. Like, just tell me, the universe, who am I? And keep asking. And at a certain point, the answer will be fully revealed. But it's this journey. It's this journey. And it's also this journey of managing the ego too, because the ego doesn't want us to really know. It's afraid for us to know. It's afraid to lose its grip on us. And so it tries to shield us from that answer fully.
So how do we become aware of when the ego's getting in the way?
Well, I think you have to come down to intention, right? So like a lot of times what I do is that, I ask myself, why did I react to this? You almost become your own therapist. Well, it's probably because I'm afraid. And one thing I love about fear that's actually interesting, it becomes a threat to the ego. The minute I know I'm afraid, I'm like, okay, there's something egoic here. Why am I afraid? Oh, maybe it's, the fear of losing what I have or not getting what I need. Okay, well, what does that mean then in relation to my inner self? How do I find peace with that fear? And ultimately realize that it's not a fear, that really it's an opportunity.
Beautiful. Okay, so when we're talking about inner peace, we're talking about what other steps are there besides coming to be aware of your stories, making peace with them, meditation? Are there other steps?
Yeah, I think one thing is a fear inventory. So if we start from the top, I want to find inner peace. What do I do? First thing that I did, and that was super helpful for me, and I found it was super helpful for others, is a fear inventory is what I call it. What am I afraid of? I had to write it down. And then I started investigating why I'm afraid of those things. And when I started finding out the questions and digging, why am I afraid? Why am I afraid? Why am I afraid? It really came down to two buckets: fear of not getting what I need, or fear of losing what I have. And then that became a great flashlight of those narratives and form me, right? And then I started writing, well, here are those narratives that I'm telling myself. And how am I speaking to myself? Not just internally in my mind, but also the way I'm interacting with the world around me. What is the music I'm listening to? Who are the friends I surround myself with? How do I dress myself? All of these different things are narratives of how I believe myself. What's my posture? All of this is signaling what I believe about myself. And then I'm taking agents of this self-awareness, fear inventory, self-awareness of the narratives, taking agency of the narratives, rewriting them in the ways that we want to do them. And then for some people, they're just good to go and chill and happy. Some other people, they're like, no, I want more. I'm thirsty for more. You want more? All right. You got, meditations, really is the first way of doing that, and finding what types of meditation work for you to ultimately understand existentially who you are. There's walking meditation. There's just sitting down meditation. I think honestly, every element of life is a form of meditation. So understanding what sense of self you can cultivate that is transcendental and ultimately grounding you to realize your majesty and awe in context of being human.
Those are great steps. Great steps. I can get behind all of those. Okay. You talk about inner light a lot. What is that?
My perspective of inner light is our divinity. Okay. I believe that, so beautiful, even physics wise, like you look at quantum computing, et cetera, how profound light is. Like basically there's no such thing as darkness, right? There's an absence of light. There's either light or an absence of it. Even me being able to see you right now is light, right? It's just the refractions and reflections. And so, my belief is that ultimately, inwardly, that light that gives us joy and happiness and joie de vivre and wanting to be here and move other people's hearts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That light ultimately is the divine light that's within each of us. And so if we can experience our divinity, we experience oneness. And why does that matter? Who cares? Let's ask that question. Who cares for us to experience oneness? Well, guess what? When we experience oneness, we experience peace. We experience a realization of who we are, why we are here. And that's ultimately the peace that all of us are searching for.
Wow. This is powerful stuff. Thank you. We are coming to the end of the show. What have we not said that you feel like is really important that you would want the audience to know and understand about all of this?
Start small. Start small. Like so many folks, and myself included, I think like I have a big book to read, or I have to listen to a long podcast, like a 2-hour podcast or whatever it is. But just like do something small and just do it daily. And the small ends up adding up. So just start small and be merciful to yourself.
Okay, small what? Give us an example. What's small?
Like
what can we do? Yeah.
Yeah, like an idea. If you're going to try meditation, turn on the timer, do 2 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Like just put a timer on. Yeah, just start, like 2 minutes, just sit there, 2 minutes, meditate. And just do it every day or every other day. Just start small on that. Or if you want to read, if there's a book you really want to read, I know I do this. I literally read like 3 to 5 sentences, or as long as I feel like it, and then just close it. I'm like, all right, next day. It takes longer, but you get through it.
So where can we find you, and where could we get the Soul app, and how can we support your mission and all that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So bringsoul.life, www.bringsoul.life is Soul's website. You can sign up online. It's a text message based tool, so you'll get text messages. You don't have to sign up or download an app or anything like that. You can get then psychological insights and recommendations for yourself. And if you want to follow me personally, I'm on Instagram at So Light, So Bright. Always love connecting with individuals.
Thank you so much for being on the show and for this chat. It's been lovely. You have a beautiful soul. Thank you for doing so much in the world to perpetuate peace and light.
Thank you. It takes one to know one.
Thank you for being here today, listeners. I know your time is precious, and we honor the time that you spend with us. Join us in 2 weeks for our next quick chat. That's one inspirational idea in 15 minutes or less. And please share this episode with somebody you know who is looking for inner peace and light. That's super easy to do. You can send a link to someone you know, you can text them something, and it just helps do good in the world. An easy way to share some love. So have a good week. Have a good 2 weeks creating your life on purpose, and we will see you for the quick chat.